visit cities of the world whose history and culture are both unique and different. A journey to places whose names sound familiar, and yet much is unknown. An extraordinary journey to the capitals of culture. The Danube's metropolis of Vienna was the imperial city of the Holy Roman Empire and imperial residence of the Emperor of Austria for more than 600 years. Just steps away from the Hofburg is St. Peter's Church, one of the most outstanding works of Austrian High Baroque. With its origin in the Plague Vow. The Volksgarten was originally one of the city gardens in front of the city castle. Amid the splendor of roses is a classical Theseus temple. An empire was once controlled from here, from the Hofburg, the Viennese residence of the Habsburg dynasty. Beyond is Joseph Square and the National Library. Father and son, Fischer von Erlach, built the State Hall. At a height of 30 meters, a huge dome covers what is surely the most beautiful library in the world. Today, the Imperial Chancery Wing contains the former court silver and table chamber. It provides a good insight into the courtly dining culture. The silver chamberlain was responsible for the cutlery, crockery, and table linen. Vienna's St. Stephen's Cathedral, one of the most cherished buildings in Austria, and also one of the most beautiful Gothic cathedrals in the world. Around the cathedral, its lower external walls are notably decorated. It was the Habsburgs who were responsible for the expansion of the cathedral. Inside the cathedral, the pulpit impresses with its richly decorative figures, and the master Anton Pilgrim has portrayed himself below the stairs. A Gothic winged altar that dates back to 1447 is located in the left aisle. The magnificent Vienna State Opera, located on Vienna's Ringstrasse, belongs to the most famous opera houses in the world. And the neoclassical Parliament also dates from the imperial era and is located in the Ringstrasse, Vienna's magnificent boulevard. The town hall too was built near the Parliament with Friedrich von Schmidt using the neo-Gothic style. The Wolfgang Johann Strauss is commemorated in the municipal park. As the Belvedere Castle was to Prince Eugen van Savoyen, who was one of the most important commanders of the Habsburg Empire. Schönbrunn Castle lies to the west of Vienna and was the summer residence of the Habsburg dynasty, the center of courtly and political life. Each summer, the entire court moved to here. The blue staircase leads up to the magnificently preserved imperial apartments. In the Walnut Room, Emperor Franz Josef received his generals, ministers, and court officials. The Grand Gallery provided the ideal setting for courtly events. Behind the main castle is the Castle Park, a Baroque work of art, with the Neptune fountain made of shining white marble and the Gloriette, all part of the splendor of a global empire. Vilnius, capital of Lithuania, a melting pot of different cultures and styles. The city's main landmark is Castle Hill, with its red Gediminas Tower that crowns the steep hill and marks the beginning of the city's history. A lower castle was built for Grand Duke Mindaugas on the banks of the Vilnia. The authority was shared by noblemen, bishops and citizens, and Vilnius developed into one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction of the St. Stanislav Basilica began in 1783. Over the years it's been affected by both fire and severe lightning. Following his canonization, Prince Casimir was buried here. Pilies Street is the oldest and most beautiful street in the Old Town. From the castle, it led towards Poland and Russia. The narrow street is lined with beautiful old buildings. In 1514, Konstanty Ostrogski, the great military commander of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, had a Russian Orthodox church built here. In the 18th century, it burned down, was rebuilt in late Baroque style, and later reconstructed according to Byzantine design. A symbol of the city is the Gates of Dawn. One of the city wall's former 9 gates, containing a chapel. The University of Vilnius was founded in 1579. The St. Johannes Church is part of the university complex. Along with its impressive altar, this modest church is one of the country's most beautiful examples of Baroque design. It possesses no less than 10 altars. The courtyard in front of the observatory is one of 12, and from the towers, the night sky can be observed. Beneath its magnificent vaults and fine paintings, the old literal library protects almost 5 million books. Just below Castle Hill is what is known as the Gothic Ensemble. The St. Bernard Church has a large wooden altar and 12 wooden side altars. Next is the St. Annan Church. Following a devastating fire and much looting, it was restored in Baroque style. Beyond the 5 bridges of the Vilnia, visitors to the artist republic of Zupia are greeted with its state symbol, a golden angel with trombone. Previously, this old residential district almost became a slum. From the outside, the St. Peter and Paul Church looks somewhat plain. Particularly noteworthy is the statue of Christ that contains real human hair. In any weather, Vilnius is a place of reawakening. A European capital of culture full of fine architecture and vibrant spirit. Thimphu is the capital of the Kingdom of Bhutan, 2,300 meters above sea level. In the land of the thundering dragon, high up between the peaks of the Himalayas. Until the 1960s, Bhutan was protected from intruders due to its geographical location and was totally cut off from the outside world. Thimphu is not a typical capital city. And also here, Buddhism dominates every aspect. On a laccolith is one of the oldest lakangs. The town is mainly inhabited by the state clergy, the royal family, members of the government, various officials, and a constantly changing middle class. In its beginnings, Bhutan was a Hindu feudal principality up until the 8th century, when Indian missionaries introduced Buddhism. The colourful marketplaces are meeting areas for both farmers and traders. A visit to Punakha is also part of it, a larger village whose main building is a monastery castle. Punakha was Bhutan's winter capital for over 300 years. Guru Rinpoche blessed this place and predicted the construction of a fortress here. The Shabdrung decided to build a jong here, in which to store a most sacred relic which he had brought from his monastery in Tibet. Many mystery dances relate to this story. Agriculture is the main source of income of its people. Around 5,500 species of plant grow here, many of them containing medicinal properties. Situated on a hill in the Punakha Valley and surrounded by paddy fields is the idyllic Chimilakan with its temple. High above the Punachang River and with a bridge checkpoint, the Wangdu Podang Jong dominates a majestic mountain ridge. A bridge at the beginning of the village marks Paro, another excursion destination. The town settlement of Paro was founded in 1985 and has since developed rapidly along the river with a main street and traditional houses. Here the land is fertile and modern technology is slowly conquering this secluded valley. The monastery is one of the most beautiful buildings. The mighty fortress once controlled the route by which the Tibetan armies repeatedly invaded. There are many legends linked to the monasteries and their temples. At the end of the valley, located on a hill, is the once proud Drukgyal fortress. But unforgettable as one of the most secluded monasteries. Between the Gulf of Aqaba and the Dead Sea, close to Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses in the heart of Jordan, and hidden beyond near impenetrable mountains, is the fascinating and mysterious ancient city of Petra. Its strategic location at the junction of 6 important caravan routes, including the famous Incense Road, brought much prosperity to the city. There are only 2 routes that lead to the rocky city of Petra. A narrow mountain pass in the northwest, and to the east, the sometimes 200-meter deep Sikh Gorge. A canal that follows the Sikh around 2 meters above ground is a fine technical masterpiece that was also created by the Nabateans. At its narrowest point, the Sikh is only 2 meters wide. It's difficult to believe that any minute now we will see one of the most impressive buildings of ancient times. John Lewis Burckhardt was the first European here in 1812. Today one can still feel his great astonishment at the sight of the suddenly appearing facade of the so-called treasure house. According to archaeologists, this area was inhabited continuously for more than 9,000 years during the New Stone Age. Prosperity first came in the 2nd century BC with the demise of the diadoques. The former tent city was replaced with buildings made of stone. Not only the architecture and ways of life, but also the political power began to consolidate ever more over time. The empire itself also gradually expanded. During the reign of Aratus I, the Nabateans managed to defend themselves against Ptolemaic Egypt. They were also influenced by Hellenism. Due to the strategic location of their capital city, the Nabateans were able to avoid conquest by hostile armies. Thus, protected by mighty rocks and complex gorges, Nabatean culture could thrive. The high places or altars that were used for animal sacrifice were of much significance. The palace of the pharaoh's daughter is located in the lower part of the ancient city. There are several royal tombs from the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. These monuments show off the skills of the stonemasons and sculptors of ancient times. A small mountain path leads from the west of the valley through the Wadi Kararib to the site of Ed Dir, a monastery. The monuments of Petra carved into the solid rock are as fascinating and mysterious to this day as they ever were. La Basilica is enthroned on the northern hill of Quito, the divine city of South American Ecuador. One of the newer places of worship, built from 1892 onwards and only completed and consecrated by the Pope almost 100 years later. It is also one of Quito's earliest religious buildings. Its construction began in 1892 and 100 years later was consecrated by the Pope. Steep and narrow steps lead downhill to the Centro Histórico, which was built on the ruins of an Inca city. The former Inca city became a splendid yet strict religious settlement of the main religious orders. When Spanish conquistador Sebastián de Benalcázar invaded, the Incas under Rumanahui destroyed their settlement, so everything had to be rebuilt. A Spanish colonial city and baroque gem. The Cathedral Metropolitana is situated on the opposite side of the square. The complex is the result of various building epochs, giving it a long and dramatic history. Inside, paintings and carvings, and in a side altar room rests General Sucre. The city boasts a very popular attraction, El Teleférico, the highest located rack railway in South America. From here, the view is overwhelming. When the Spaniards conquered the Inca realm, various Catholic orders emerged. So the Jesuit order built the Baroque La Compañía de Jesus church that is known as the greatest house of God in Latin America. San Francisco Square, that includes a monastery of the same name, has, since the arrival of the Spaniards, been one of the city's 3 main meeting places and is situated above the Plaza Grande. It was here that the Franciscan friars first settled. The ancient town of Quito, with all its alleys, buildings, courtyards and particularly churches, is a gem of colonial architecture. Next to the museum is the Calle de la Ronda, the city's oldest street, with beautiful old houses with balconies and inner courtyards. A performance by the Balla India Humanizzati demonstrates the spirit of the city's original inhabitants and the country's largest variety of regions, all united by the Andes. Dance, music and clothing are strongly influenced by Peru, as it served as the foundation of the former Inca realm. A huge iron statue of the winged Virgin of Quito, the symbol of the city, is situated upon the El Panachillo volcano that seems to protect the old town. General Sucre and a stone cross stand in front of the white steeple of the Dominican monastery. The gorgeous equipped Capilla Virgen del Rosario is well known. It is situated to one side of the main altar and was donated by Emperor Karl V. And next to it, the Santa Catalina Nunnery. The former capital of the northern Inca realm became the most Spanish city of the New World and continues to gleam in all of its colonial splendor. Wrocław is regarded as the crossing point of Central European history. The center of the old town is Rheinic, one of the largest markets in Europe, with its Gothic town hall and its brick-red facade as the focal point. A work of bourgeois arts decorated with small towers, sculptures and a huge astronomical clock from 1580. The old but magnificently maintained patrician houses around the square create an impression of a bygone era. Some facades are decorated with sgraffiti, and the memorial to Count Alexander of Fredo stands monumentally at the foot of the new town hall. On the northwestern corner of the marketplace is the Gothic St. Elizabeth Church with its characteristic tower. Since 1945, the altar has been adorned with a copy of the image of Our Lady from Częstochowa, and the extraordinary pulpit radiates in black gold. The church is also known as the mausoleum of the city's wealthiest citizens, a collection of epitaphs from several eras consisting of gravestones and slabs. Today, the city of encounters is aware of its diverse roots. In 1659, the Jesuits obtained the Piast fortress and founded a grammar school. Next to it, the university was created. In the upper level is the Aula Leopoldina, the largest and most prestigious room. A baroque synthesis of the arts of architecture, sculpture and painting. A gold-covered room of splendor and monumentality. From the tower, 4 stone figures which symbolically show the faculties overlook the old town and the river Oder. The nearby university church was built between 1689 and 1700. Christoph Tausch led the conversion of the imperial castle into a church, and prestigious gallery parapets and main altar were added. And Johann Michael Rottmeyer, together with other artists, oversaw this synthesis of the arts. The so-called Sand Bridge leads across the river Oder to Sand Island, which was once densely populated. The Sand Church, with the Augustinian monastery, was built on the main trade route across the island. One of the most beautiful Gothic sacral buildings from the 14th century. The Dom Bridge connects the Sand Island with the Dom Island, the original birthpoint of today's city of Wrocław. The most valuable monument here is the cathedral dedicated to John the Baptist. It is made of red brick and has 2 characteristic towers and spires. Construction work on the venerable church began in 1242 and was not completed until the middle of the 14th century. The cathedral and the chapels combine Gothic with Baroque. Wrocław, an enchanting city with an expansive history. A city that has survived rulers and wars through great belief. Yogyakarta is located in the center of the Indonesian island of Java and has been under the reign of a sultan since pre-colonial times. And also the capital of Indonesia during the War of Independence. Fort and Museum Vredenburg is known as a striking building of the Dutch colonial era. The Sultan approved its construction in 1765. Jalan Malioboro is the most famous street and has existed since the city was founded, with shops, colonial houses and horse-drawn carriages awaiting customers. The Sono Budoyo Museum is considered the city's most important museum, with an unparalleled collection of Javanese cultural goods. The carefully curated exhibitions give a fascinating insight into the history, culture and religion of Java. It's interesting that both the commissioners and the architects were Dutch. The bird market has not lost its appeal. Songbirds have for a long time been considered a status symbol in Indonesian society. And even brightly colored chicks can be found among the many bird cages. Taman Sari, the water castle, was the Sultan and his court's summer residence. Asking the question how the fragrant, beautiful garden must once have looked like with its sparkling ponds and bubbling springs. A place of rest, but also a place for the Sultan to receive visitors on a gigantic scale and with refined splendor. This magnificent complex consisted of more than 50 buildings. Including cool living rooms and smartly designed bathrooms. The Sultan and his court ladies rested and recovered here, and a visit still provides a glimpse into the golden times. The Sultan's palace, also called Kreton, is the spiritual and political heart of the city. The palace complex, built in 1755 under Sultan Hamengkubuwono I, is still characterized today by its splendor and pragmatism. With gilded columns and ceilings. Garments and works of art are exhibited in showrooms. A particular highlight is the throne of the last Sultan. On Sundays, classical court dances are also performed in the palace. Culturally, the city is considered the cradle of Javanese culture, which is also evident in the shadow play with the gamelan music. Ramayana ballet features the story of Rama and the battle of gods and demons. The recurring battle between good and evil that dominates the world of faith. St. Gallen in eastern Switzerland. Crooked alleys with late Gothic half-timbered houses, which with their magnificent, splendid oriels reveal the wealth of the rich builders. Since the Middle Ages, the nearby Lake Constance and the River Rhine have been connecting transport routes. And in 1454, the city was incorporated into the Swiss Confederation. In between, small squares are ever present, often with fountains at their center. It was the time of detachment from the ruling monastery and the beginning of civil rights, such as the right to be prosecuted by one's own judge, and the beginnings of urban legislation. The Textile Museum provides the chance to learn about the invention of embroidered fabrics. See the world's first embroidery machine and a collection of models, pattern books and designs. The St. Gallen lace and embroidery have been in demand and exported for centuries. The Evangelical Reformed Church of St. Lawrence is located in the center of the Old Town. Even today, it points to the former rivalry between the Protestant city and the Catholic Gallus monastery. In the 13th century, the inhabitants of the town wanted their church to be independent of the Catholic abbot in the monastery. The Gallus Square adjoins the monastery district. Craftsmen and people who did not belong to the monastic community settled here. Behind it, the separation wall separates the Catholic monastery from the Reformed city. The Gallus Square adjoins the monastery district. Craftsmen and people who did not belong to the monastic community settled here. Urban development began at Gallen Square, and the residential and commercial buildings of wealthy merchants can be found here even now. Here in the year 612, the Irish travelling monk Gallus found the ideal place for a hermit cell. A place where years later a Benedictine monastery was established, which was to become one of the most important cultural centres in the Middle Ages. The monumental cathedral was preceded by several other buildings. Ultimately, the dominating double tower and the splendidly decorated facade were built. The altar landscape, with the high altar and 6 altars, is separated from the main nave by a fence. And the dome in the middle of the church shows paradise with a gathering of 60 saints. But the main reason the monastery of St. Gallen really became world famous was due to the abbey library, which is housed in a baroque hall, with fittings of gilded carvings and parquet made of wood from fir trees. The vault with stuccos and frescoes. St. Gallen, with all its splendour, reflects the golden age of the monastery, but also the successes of both industry and the bourgeoisie. Yerevan, capital of Armenia, 29 years older than Rome. Dignified, powerful, and at the same time protective, Mother Armenia seems to watch over the city from a northern hill. The view of Yerevan is overwhelming. The cascade leads down to the city over 5 levels, stairs and halls inside and outside, complemented by water basins and figures. National building traditions were combined with modern urban development. Close by is the Matera. Below the main entrance of the Museum of Ancient Manuscripts is Mesrop Mashtots, the creator of the ancient Armenian alphabet. Matera is an old Armenian word that means library, storage place for manuscripts. Old Yerevan, with its traditional buildings, with carved wooden adornments on entrances and inside living areas. The facades of multicolored decorative stone are quite captivating, and Oriental designs reveal their original influence. Classical music also plays a major role in Yerevan, with operas and symphony orchestras alive in Freedom Square. Steeply sloping rock faces end in the ravine of the Hrazdan River, which forms a natural partition. Deep below the course of the river runs in pristine nature. On the western hill above the city is the memorial of the genocide of the Armenian people. The center of the city is the so-called Republic Square, flanked by the Historical Museum, Chanzanjan House, and the Painting Gallery. Nearby, thousands of blue, white, and golden mosaics shine out in the sun. The Persian Mosque. Hero David of Sassoon stands welcoming in front of central Kajaran station. all in stark contrast to the emptiness of the hall. The Abuni Museum is located at the foot of a fortress which King Agici I built above his capital. The realm of Urartu originated in around the middle of the 9th century BC in the Armenian highlands. It featured a refined fortress with palaces, warehouses, and residential buildings. The world's largest Armenian apostolic cathedral was completed and consecrated in 2001. And taverns often feature singing, dancing, and good food. Today, this is a vibrant city that has become a booming metropolis in the South Caucasus, full of heart and worldliness. Yerevan is one of the oldest cities in the world, a living reminder of the ancient Orient. The Koran Gate leads to the city of Shiraz, a city of love, roses, and poetry, located in the south of the Iranian highlands. Famous Persian poets once lived here, whose mausoleums are regularly visited. This, the Paradise Garden, is one of the city's many parks. Nasr al-Mulk had a 3-story palace built here. Underground drains today continue to nourish a number of gardens. A citadel protected the trading centre, and the ruler resided with auspicious power and ceremony. Guests of the Khan were accommodated in an adjoining garden with ponds, surrounded by the amazing splendour of that time. Both the interior and exterior of the pavilion are decorated with exceptional tile mosaics, the motifs of which depict various scenes of life in the royal court. The Vakil bathhouse is elaborately decorated with mosaics. Scenes are recreated here with lifelike figures conveying the intimacy and appeal of the bathing complex. The Vakil complex also contains a mosque of the same name. All from the same source, 48 twisted, ribbed marble columns support a ceiling covered with tile mosaics. The Vakil Bazaar, whose main thoroughfare is around 800 meters long, is the most beautiful in Iran. From 1871, the bazaar and its warehouses served as a center of trade for 100 years. On both sides of the main street are shops which offer fabrics, spices, ceramics, carpets and clothing. The Shah Sheragh Mausoleum contains the remains of the brother of Imam Reza. The King of Light died in Shiraz and is revered as a saint. The complex is particularly impressive in the evening. The ancient Friday Mosque is entered through the mausoleum. Its design is typical of Persia's royal court. The Nazir al-Mulk Mosque with its courtyard pond is known as the Rose Mosque due to the floral decoration of its tiles. The winter prayer hall radiates in the light of stained glass windows. The old city palace of the Kavam al-Mulk family is now a museum. The former Breoni is named after the bitter-flavoured oranges grown in the courtyard. The hall's walls and ceiling are decorated with splendid mirrors and in between, elaborate tiles. The Madrase Khan is the most well-known traditional university in Shiraz. Also interesting is a building from the Zand or Khajran period. The three-story garden house contains rooms with fine mirrored walls and wooden tarsiers. Everything resounds with the infinite wealth and important art of that period. Nearby is a garden that contains the mausoleum of the poet Sadi. When Tehran became the capital of the Khajran Empire, Shiraz became less important. And yet even today the city's scholars and poets are still held in high esteem. Modernity and tradition. Matera, the cave city in the southern Italian region Basilicata. Although it looks like a typical medieval city, below there are underground arches with reservoirs. But the real old town of Matera, a gorge of light yellow limestone in which people once built cave settlements, seems like another world. The so-called Sassi, the old city quarters. Thousands of years of history await the visitors of these Sassi. It's also believed that Matera is the third oldest city in the world. The church of San Pietro Barisano can be recognized by the towering bell tower. This is a typical example of a church completely carved into the rock, the facade of which was not built until later. Like heaps of stones, the houses pile up around the cathedral hill. The area was rich in valleys, gorges and stalactite plateaus, covered with woods, and many rivers made survival for human communities possible. The monumental church complex Sant'Agostino consists of church and monastery annex. Today you can see the extension in baroque style with altars and paintings. And attached to it, a widely ramified crypt. From the late Middle Ages onwards, coastal inhabitants sought shelter from pirates in the caves. The cathedrale towers over the Sassi in an impressive luminescent glow at the highest point of the old town. Outside, a simple Apulian Romanesque facade, but inside, the Baroque triumphs and harmonizes with the medieval architecture. At the cathedral square, the downward view from Belvedere shows a maze of buildings, churches, towers, rocks, narrow valleys, stairs and terraces. Thereafter the Normans followed the Hohenstoffers, the Angioini and the Argonas. Revivals alternated with downturns. In the 14th century, the church San Pietro Caviazza was built directly on the edge of the Gravina. Three gates lead into the church, which was modified in different eras. The many places of worship are considered to be proof that the clergy was becoming increasingly important. Until the 1950s, people and animals lived here crowded together in the caves without windows, heating, or running water. Sasso Cavioso is dominated by the steep rock spur called Monterone, with two small cave churches on its top. People lived here for centuries. What then remained was an abandoned, ruined town until it was rediscovered by tourism. Today, Matera alone has become a true cult entity and also world famous through films, and in 2019 became the European capital of culture. And now it's easier for the traveller to understand the diversity of culture, the history of peoples and nations, and also to recognize similar roots of faith. Throughout history, mankind has been creating its capitals of culture.